What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Football season is just around the corner. I don't know about you guys, but me personally, I really am excited for this season. College football, the NFL season, and training camp is just around the corner, man. So we're not going to be going too longer without football. And on today's episode, it's a really good one if you are a football lover like me. We're going to be discussing what if the Dallas Cowboys lose early in the NFL playoffs this year? Does Brock Purdy hold back the 49ers from winning the Super Bowl? What are Caleb Williams' chances of winning the Heisman Trophy? Once again, there has only been one player in the history of college football to win the Heisman Trophy twice. And how good will Utah be? Are they being overlooked once again this season? Before we get into it, if you haven't already, make sure that you guys go ahead, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We go live every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Listen to the JT Sports Podcast. We're not just available on YouTube. You can find us on all podcasting platforms. Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, you can find the JT Sports Podcast. All you got to do is type in the JT Sports Podcast on any podcasting service and it will pop up. Or you can go down to the description down below, scroll down, and there will be the links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast. Leave us with a 5-star review if you support the content, you love the channel. It's free to do and it only takes 2 seconds to do. The Dallas Cowboys, the Cowboys always have high expectations every single season. It seems like every year Cowboy fans say, this is going to be the year, and then they end up disappointing. But 2023 really could be the year that the Dallas Cowboys win it all. And if there was a year for Cowboy fans to be super confident about their Super Bowl chances, 2023 is the season for that. But what if the Dallas Cowboys pull a classic Dallas Cowboys and they underachieve this year? What if Dallas makes it to the playoffs and they have an early playoff exit? What would that mean for Mike McCarthy's future? Because think about it. He fired former offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, and what I believe was a scapegoat move. Cowboy fans have their opinion about it. They say he wasn't a good OC, but I do think that you have to place a fair amount of criticism on Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott. And the thing about Mike McCarthy is that he's not somebody that's able to get it done in the big moments. And you look at Jerry Jones, this dude is hungrier than ever to win another Super Bowl. The last time the Cowboys won the Super Bowl, we were still watching replays on VHS tapes. And if Mike McCarthy can't at least get Dallas out of the first round, do you think he returns in 2024? Because I don't. And there are some fans who speculate that Dan Quinn didn't take any head coaching jobs because he believed that maybe if Mike McCarthy ends up getting fired, he'll be the next man up to replace him. Now, like I said, that is speculation. That is the word on the street. But if the Dallas Cowboys can't go past the first round of the playoffs, it would be a massive disappointment. Think about everything that the Cowboys have done this offseason. You trade for Brandon Cooks to give Dak Prescott another weapon. That was one of your Achilles heels last season, that outside of CeeDee Lamb, you didn't have another weapon for Dak Prescott to throw the football to. Brandon Cooks is one of the most underrated receivers of the past decade, and you pair him with CeeDee Lamb, plus you got Michael Gallup. You have a really good receiving core. Your offensive line should be really good as long as everybody can stay healthy. Tony Pollard is primed for a breakout year with Ezekiel Elliott being gone. And this is the most talented defense in the NFL. I think that the Cowboys are going to have the #1 defense in the league this year. With the addition of Stephon Gilmore, you draft Mozzie Smith. And if Dallas ends up not going far in the playoffs, I don't see how Mike McCarthy possibly could keep his job. The Dallas Cowboys have underachieved for well over the last 4 years. They always have one of the top rosters in the NFC, and yet they've yet to make it even to a conference title game. This is a big year for Mike McCarthy. You could consider this a make or break year for Mike McCarthy. Jerry Jones, it was a little bit of a shocker that he allowed Mike McCarthy to part ways with Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore kind of was seen as a golden boy in Jerry Jones' eyes. There were many people who were high on Kellen Moore. And when you look at how the way the offense kind of unraveled, you can definitely understand why they opted to go with the decision. But Kellen Moore, I kind of feel like it was a scapegoat move. And when you look at coaches who make those kinds of firings, it often means that they feel a little bit of pressure. And Mike McCarthy has probably the toughest job in the NFL. Coaching for the Dallas Cowboys, the most popular team in the NFL, is the hardest job in all of sports. You have all the media attention. You always have high expectations year after year, and you expect to compete for a Super Bowl every single season. And if Dallas isn't even able to make it to the conference championship this year, it would be considered a disappointment in a lot of Dallas Cowboy fans' eyes. And if they lose early in the postseason, I don't think Mike McCarthy returns next year. Now, we don't know who ends up becoming the next head coach. Maybe it's Dan Quinn, maybe it's somebody else, but the Dallas Cowboys losing in the wild card round this year would be a massive disaster. And there probably would be some massive changes. And maybe not just that head coach, but think about Dak Prescott. What if Dak Prescott has another performance like he did against the 49ers last season when he came up short in the big moments? Do the Dallas Cowboys look to trade Dak Prescott and move on from him? I know there's a lot of Cowboy fans that you can't say anything wrong about Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is never the reason for the Dallas Cowboys not being able to get it done. But sometimes you might have to make some changes. Go out there and bring in a new QB. There's nothing wrong with switching things up. And for Jerry Jones, this is the most hungriest that he's ever been to win a championship. And just losing in the first round of the playoffs, it just wouldn't sit well with him. And I don't think Mike McCarthy would return if that was to happen. But you guys let me know. What do you guys think will happen if the Cowboys have an early playoff exit? Down in the comment section down below. Brock Purdy doubters are still chirping at the bit. And I really don't get why people don't think that Brock Purdy is good enough to get the 49ers to the Super Bowl. This is somebody who started last year as the third string quarterback behind Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo. He got no first team reps, and he came in against the Miami Dolphins and lit it up. And ever since then, this dude has been balling, and yet he's still not getting the proper respect he deserves. And I think a large reason why people hesitate to put a lot of stock in Brock Purdy this season is simply for where he was drafted. People equate where somebody was drafted to potential. There's still people out there, believe it or not, who believe that Trey Lance deserves the opportunity to be the starting quarterback for the 49ers this season, despite how far Brock Purdy took San Fran last year, which is unbelievable to me. You see, that's what I like to call politicking. Politicking is where you don't start the better guy. You start the better guy for other reasons not related to performance on the field. And Trey Lance hasn't been a good performer. This dude doesn't even play all that well in practice. Brock Purdy takes the 49ers to the postseason and deep into the playoffs. And many 49ers players, if you listen to Deebo Samuel tell it, if Brock Purdy never would have got injured against the Philadelphia Eagles, the 49ers would have won that game and they would have went to the Super Bowl. So I don't get why people in the NFL world are just so hesitant to put a lot of faith and stock into Brock Purdy. Oh, JT, he was Mr. Irrelevant. He was a one-hit wonder. It doesn't matter where you're drafted. All that matters is how you perform on the field. It's a performance-based league. So why are we still questioning Brock Purdy? Why are people saying that Brock Purdy isn't good enough to get the job done when there has been plenty of quarterbacks throughout the history of the NFL who weren't considered elite at the quarterback position to win championships? I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo not too long ago took the 49ers to the Super Bowl, and if he never overthrew Emmanuel Sanders, maybe they win that game. And maybe how you view Jimmy Garoppolo is a little bit altered if they win that Super Bowl against Kansas City. Brock Purdy has a great team around him. A good offensive line, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Chris McCaffrey. That's one of the best trios in the NFL to have if you're a young quarterback. And you look at Brock Purdy, for somebody to come in not having no first team reps at all, that shows preparation. You don't often have a quarterback who comes in with no first team reps, not really having any chemistry with any of the starters, who just balls out like that. Brock Purdy was the best rookie quarterback from last year's draft class, and he was the last pick of the draft. Better than Desmond Ridder, Kenny Pickett, and all the quarterbacks that were ahead of him. You just don't see that very often. That's something that you see in the Disney movie. And if you're still doubting Brock Purdy, I ask you why. Is it because you don't think he's talented enough? It's not all about talent. Some of the greatest quarterbacks that ever played this game had limitations. Tom Brady had limitations. Drew Brees had limitations. He didn't have the strongest arm. He was undersized. The best quarterbacks in this game are the ones that know their strengths and they play to what they do best. And you have a head coach that's able to have Brock Purdy, who put Brock Purdy in the perfect system. I don't know how many of you guys watched Brock Purdy during his time at Iowa State, but he was a several-year starter. He had a lot of experience, and he won a lot of games during his time at Iowa State. And you saw how bad Iowa State was once he left. And when you look at Brock Purdy, one thing that he does incredibly well is how he processes defense. He sees it and gets the ball out fast, and he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And everything that Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't do, Brock Purdy could do. And you look at Trey Lance, this is somebody who still is a very inaccurate passer, still struggles to read defenses, and doesn't have that much experience playing football, not just at an NFL level, but football in general. He didn't really play a lot of years and have all that much experience when he was quarterbacking for North Dakota State. Brock Purdy is in a conference that doesn't really have strong quarterback plays. Who are the best quarterbacks in the NFC that potentially could stop the 49ers from reaching the Super Bowl? You have Jalen Hurts, the best QB in the NFC, and then who after that? Aaron Rodgers is gone. Jared Goff, Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith. I mean, I love Geno Smith. I love Justin Fields. I love Jalen Hurts. But outside of Jalen Hurts, the NFC really doesn't have any elite quarterbacks. It's not top heavy like the AFC. Now, if this was the AFC, it would be a different ball game because you're not going to make it out of the AFC strictly based off coaching. There are just way too many good quarterbacks on that side of the NFL. But you look at the current state of the NFC, there's no great quarterbacks, which leaves the door wide open for the 49ers to be able to win with the Brock Purdy, being able to win off great coaching and having a talented supporting cast around them. Brock Purdy has good mobility. He's really accurate in the short and intermediate passing game. And I think that if given opportunity, Brock Purdy has a really nice deep ball. Name me one thing that Brock Purdy can't do that Jimmy Garoppolo could do. Name me one thing that Trey Lance is better than Brock Purdy at right now. The only thing that Trey Lance has on Brock Purdy is athleticism. That's it. Brock Purdy still, you shouldn't sleep on his mobility. There's plenty of times when he was able to extend plays, get outside the pocket, and pick up yards with his legs. He just wasn't asked to do it that much because of how good the offensive line was. And when you look at how he performed all last season, he didn't have any games where he struggled. And then you look at his first ever playoff game against the Seattle Seahawks. There were people saying, oh, this is where the Brock Purdy train ends. And then he ends up balling out. Now, although he did start that game out pretty slow, He ended up leading the 49ers to a 41-23 victory, completing 60% of his passes, 332 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. And he played pretty well against the Dallas Cowboys, who had arguably the best defense in the NFL outside of San Fran. You just don't see this kind of performance out of a quarterback that doesn't have first team reps, doesn't have good time with his teammates, and it's the last pick of the NFL draft. There's a reason why they call it Mr. Irrelevant. They kind of make a joke out of it. It's kind of more of a meme than it is versus somebody who actually gets taken serious. Brock Purdy wasn't afforded anything like Trey Lance was. The 49ers basically forced Trey Lance to be the starter, despite the fact that he didn't outright beat Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo was the better quarterback than Trey Lance, but Trey Lance ended up just getting the wishes of Kyle Shanahan, and they basically sit Jimmy Garoppolo for all the training camp. They try to trade him away, it doesn't work, and then Trey Lance gets injured, and then they need Jimmy Garoppolo to save the day, and then he goes down, and Brock Purdy still is able to get them far in the postseason. I don't get why people continue to doubt Brock Purdy. It's not all about talent. The greatest players to ever play this sport had limitations. Not all of them, but a good amount of them. And Brock Purdy, everything that Kyle Shanahan needs him to do, he can do in this offense. This offense is predicated off timing, getting the ball out fast, play action, being able to get outside the pocket and make throws. There were a lot of throws that Brock Purdy made that you would never see Jimmy Garoppolo be able to do, being able to change his arm angles. I think Brock Purdy is being heavily disrespected this season. I don't think that the 49ers Super Bowl chances take a hurt with Brock Purdy being underneath center this year. I think that a lot of you guys keep trying to paint a narrative about somebody just from where they were drafted at versus just trying to judge guys based on how they performed on the field. This is a performance-based league. It's not based off politicking. Many of you guys are politicking with this situation. Trey Lance needs a shot. No, he doesn't. He hasn't proven anything. Brock Purdy has a winning record as a starter. The 49ers went undefeated with Brock Purdy at the helm at QB. So why would you think that he hurts their Super Bowl chances? Oh, JT, it's his second year. They got film on Brock Purdy. These defensive coordinators been watching tape all summer on him. Bro, do you know how lame and worn down that whole, they got film on him argument is? That's some of the worst arguments that you can make in the year 2023. Everybody's watching film. Do you not think that Brock Purdy isn't getting better despite the fact that he's coming off that elbow injury? He's still working. He's watching film. He's trying to get better. He's trying to develop. He's trying to improve. Defensive coordinators aren't the only people who watch film and can get better. Newsflash, quarterbacks can too. Stop using that casual argument. That's what you are, a casual. They're watching film. They're going to have a better understanding of his tendencies and what he has to do. That is a bunch of bull jockey. I'm trying to keep it rated G today, but that's a bunch of bull crap, man. Stop with the lame arguments. Give me a reasonable argument or debate for why Brock Purdy hurts the 49ers' chances of making it out of the NFC. They have a great defense. They have a great supporting cast around him and a fantastic head coach. Brock Purdy is good enough to lead the 49ers to the Super Bowl, and if you're doubting Brock Purdy, this dude is a lot better than what you may think. What if Brock Purdy ends up becoming a top 10 quarterback? Some of you guys still won't give him the recognition for that, simply for where he was drafted. Stop trying to tie people's potential to where they were drafted. Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time, and he was a 6th round pick. Antonio Brown is one of the greatest receivers of the past decade, and he was a late round pick. There's been previous players who've had Hall of Fame level careers that were not picked in the 1st round. Stop trying to tie a narrative based on where somebody was drafted. Just because where you was drafted doesn't equate to talent, because scouts get this wrong every single time. If the 49ers had the chance to redraft and they had the pick between Brock Purdy and Trey Lance and could only have one of those guys on their roster, given with how they've seen both of these guys perform, who do you guys think they're taking? Brock Purdy or reaching for potential with Trey Lance? I'm pretty confident that 99.999% they take Brock Purdy all over again. I think the 49ers Super Bowl chances are fine with Brock Purdy at the helm at QB. If you haven't already, make sure that you guys leave a like if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. We go live every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Follow us on all of our social media platforms. You can find us on Instagram at JTSports_ and on Twitter at JTSports__. If you're enjoying this episode so far, make sure that you go ahead, rate us 5 stars. You can find us on Apple and Spotify at the JT Sports Podcast, and on YouTube, you can go down to the description down below, scroll down a little bit, and you can find the links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast. What are the chances of Caleb Williams repeating as the Heisman Trophy winner again? Now, there's only been one player in the history of college football to win the Heisman Trophy more than once, and it's Archie Griffin during his time with Ohio State in the 70s. Now, players that have come close to repeating as Heisman winners have been Lamar Jackson, who finished 3rd place in voting in 2017, Johnny Manziel, who was in 5th place in 2013, and then Tim Tebow was a finalist in 2008, which he finished 3rd in voting, and 5th place in 2009. So it's really hard to repeat as a multiple winner of the Heisman Trophy. And the reason for it is because you always have new players who come in and end up having good seasons. And plus, once you win the Heisman, people already know what you're capable of. So your season after you win it has to be better than your previous season. And you look at Lamar Jackson, he had a better season in 2017 than he did in 2016, and he still wasn't able to win it again. And many people believe that he should have won it in 2017. But you look at Caleb Williams, though, I think he's a lot different. I think that Caleb Williams may be the most talented quarterback in college football over the last decade. And he's playing for USC. And last year, USC lost in the Pac-12 Championship game to Utah. Imagine if USC ends up going undefeated this year, they win the Pac-12 Championship, and Caleb Williams puts up numbers that were just as similar to what he did last year, which is definitely possible. And you look at the games that he has to play in this year, on the road against Notre Dame, Utah, Washington, and Oregon, he's going to be going up against 2 potential Heisman contenders this year, and Michael Penix and Bo Nix, which Bo Nix has top 5 odds to win the award right now. I believe that Michael Penix is up there in that conversation also. So if Caleb Williams can ball out against Washington and Oregon on the road, and he still puts up similar numbers to what he did last season, this is a very good chance I believe he can win the Heisman again. This dude's talent is unquestionable. If you think Caleb Williams is overrated, then you're just a hater. You're entitled to your own opinion, but the Heisman is a popularity contest at the end of the day. You can say that voters are biased against previous winners, but at the end of the day, if Caleb Williams ends up outplaying Bo Nix and Michael Penix, who should be in that conversation or in that discussion around the end of the season, I don't see how they end up not giving him the award again. Everybody has a difficult time watching all the Pac-12 games if you're living on the East Coast, because a lot of the Pac-12 kickoffs take place a little bit late at night. But Caleb Williams is that kind of player that you always see on social media floating around when he makes a big play. The Heisman Trophy is all about popularity. And Caleb Williams right now is probably the most recognizable player in college football. And you look at what he did last season, JT, how is he going to be able to outdo himself last year? He had over 50 total touchdowns, 10 on the ground and 42 through the air. I get that. But he could have an even better season this year. USC is going to have a really good offensive line. The wide receiving core, despite losing Jordan Addison, is still amongst the best in college football. And USC, with the better defense, has a better chance of making it to the playoffs this year than what they did last year. So imagine if USC ends up winning the Pac-12 this year. That only boosts Caleb Williams' Heisman chances because he didn't win it last season. So if he wins the Pac-12 Championship, gets USC to the playoffs, plus he's also is able to replicate or have similar or better stats than what he did last year, I don't get how he doesn't win it again unless you just have the other finalists who just completely ball out of this world. And you got to think about how big of a brand USC football is. Everybody's going to know when Caleb Williams has a great game, and he's only going to be better than what he was last year because he can only go up. This dude is just that good of a talent. So I think that Caleb Williams has a really good chance at being able to win the Heisman Trophy again. And if I had to bet money on who would win the Heisman this year, I would bet all my money on Caleb Williams. Once again, he's the best player in college football. And USC, if they're able to win the Pac-12 Championship, I think that not only helps Caleb Williams' chances, but it also makes it look very good in the eyes of the voters because he was able to get USC back to the mainstay of college football, which is the college football playoffs. He's able to make USC relevant again. So can Caleb Williams win the Heisman again? I most definitely think that he can because I don't see who else is going to be able to really give him a great run for it. I love Drake May, but I don't think Drake May is going to be able to put up the kind of numbers that Caleb Williams did last year. And I don't think USC is going to be as good as compared to, well, I think USC is going to be better than UNC this year. So normally, the players who end up being finalists for the Heisman Trophy, most of the times their teams are really good and are in the conversation for the college football playoffs. And if USC can win more games what they did last year and win this conference, I think that only boosts Caleb Williams' chances. Last thing I want to talk about is the Utah Utes, man. Are y'all overlooking Utah again? Have you not learned your lesson the last 2 years when it comes to Utah football? Like, I have a love-hate relationship with Utah. First of all, this is the most underrated fan base in college football. When I first started talking about college football on a regular basis and I was talking about Utah, I was not expecting the Utes fan base to be one of my biggest viewers and one of my most supportive fan bases on this platform. And you look at Utah going into this year, once again, they're not favorites to win the Pac-12. Surprise, surprise. And you look at what they did last year, right? They upset USC in the Pac-12 Championship game. Although Caleb Williams did get injured, I do think that played a pretty big factor, but Utah fans will tell y'all otherwise. I'll give y'all that. And the year before, they smashed Oregon. Not once, but twice, and it wasn't even close. So Utah football is definitely a team that you need to stop overlooking. I think Utah right now is what Wisconsin used to be in the early 2010s of the Big Ten. You never counted them out when it came to their chances of being able to win the Big Ten, but you never really viewed them as a national championship contender. And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful to Utah, but Utah is one of those teams that sometimes they end up having a couple of upsets or two, but they always are able to keep your team from making it to the championship, or they always find a way to end your favorite team's playoff hopes. And that's what Utah is. Utah is what I like to call a home wrecker and a dream ender. You don't want to play Utah if you have college football playoff implications on the line going into the game that you have against the Utes. And you look at what they have coming back this year. Yeah, you lost tight end Dalton Kincaid, but do you know about Brant Kuithe? Brant Kuithe was one of the best tight ends in college football alongside of Dalton Kincaid. Outside of Brock Bowers, it was Dalton Kincaid and Brant Kuithe. And Brant Kuithe last year, he got injured after 4 games. And before that injury, this dude was going off. And then you got Cam Rising, who is a really good quarterback. He's a gamer. This dude is tough as nails. He's somebody that can come through for you in the big moments in the clutch. And they return 83% of their offensive production from last year, which is one of the highest in the Pac-12 going into the 2023 college football season. And you look at the talent that they have at wide receiver. You got Devon Vile, who was second on the team in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Mooney Park. So you got a really good group of receivers. And then I really love the talent that they have at running back. Now, Utah has got great production out of their running back position over the last couple of years. I think that Utah is one of the best programs in college football when it comes to player development, not just at the running back position, but overall, because you got to remember that Utah isn't one of those programs that brings in top 10, top 15 recruiting classes year after year like a USC or Oregon is able to do. Like, a lot of their guys end up being 3-star recruits. They may be able to get a couple of 4 stars, maybe a 5-star here and there, but the reason why Utah is so good is not because of them always having super stat recruiting classes, but also due to the fact that Kyle Whittingham and his coaching staff are fantastic when it comes to player development, which is key. And when you look at what the Utes have at the running back position, Jaquindon Jackson, Jalen Glover, who I'm really excited to watch this season. I think he can have a breakout year. Michael Bernard, this is one of the best running back cores in all of college football, and not too many people talk about it. We talk about Ohio State, Michigan, but Utah is up there. Now, they may not continually always put guys into the NFL who get drafted. Tavion Thomas, I thought, was going to be a mid-round selection, and he went undrafted. But you look at how talented the running back position has been for Utah over the years. That's a large reason why this team is so tough to beat. You see, I think the Pac-12, why they struggle against Utah is because Utah isn't a finesse team. Oregon and Washington, they like to throw the football all over the field against you. But Utah, you know what they want to do. They want to run the football, and they want to impose their will on you. Most of the times when Utah plays and has all these big upsets, they're the more physical team than their opponents in this conference. This conference just isn't built off physical football. Like, Utah kind of plays like a classic Big Ten SEC team. Smash mouth football. We're going to run it down your throat, and we're going to pop you in the chin strap. That's why I love watching Utah football. And Kyle Whittingham, I really feel like this program and this team embodies his personality perfectly. This is a tough football team. They're a scrappy football team. They're going to claw, they're going to scratch, and they're going to find a way to win the game despite all odds, even if you bet against them, even if they're not favorites. And you look at the talent that they have on defense, I'm a little bit concerned about their secondary, all right, but you do have linebacker Lander Barton, who was highly touted coming out of high school. He was a true freshman last year, and he probably is the best linebacker going into this season in the Pac-12. He was one of the best linebackers in the Pac-12 last year, and this was as a true freshman. And their secondary, it was good on paper, but at times, though, they were prone to giving up some big plays in the passing game. I feel like they gave up a lot of big plays in the passing game in certain games. USC, UCLA. Now, their defensive line is going to be really good. As a matter of fact, that's another reason why Utah is so good in this conference, because not too many teams in the Pac-12 have great play on the interior. Their offensive line is still going to be really good. Their defensive line has a lot of talent. Not just that you got guys who are capable of being able to stop the run, but they also are more than capable of being able to get pressure on the QB. Now, they did lose a couple of key pass rushers, but I do think with how good they are at player development, I think that Utah, their defense shouldn't have too much of a drop-off. As a matter of fact, I think that their front seven could be better this year than what it was last year. You lost Mahmoud Diabate, who I think he was all right, but I definitely think they could do a little bit better than him. And when you look at their schedule this year and how tough the Pac-12 is, you start the season off against Florida, right? Which you should win that game because Florida isn't good, and you shouldn't have lost to them last year. And then you got to go on the road and play Baylor. That's going to be an interesting game, but I'll take you against that one. You got a Weber State or Weber State, whatever you use to pronounce it. So you should be 3-0 before you have your conference opener against UCLA. And UCLA, I think they're in for a little bit of a down year. I think they are in a little bit of a retool. And then you got to go against Oregon State. And this is where things start to get a little bit tough for Utah this year. Now, Utah, like I said, they're not one of those teams that you should overlook. Now, they probably won't end up being in the conversation to make the college football playoffs, but you look at their next couple of games after they play UCLA, really tough. They're playing the best teams in the Pac-12. Oregon State, they were the biggest sleeper in the Pac-12 last season. I told y'all not to sleep on the Beavs. And now they have DJ Uyunglele at QB. They could be interesting. So that could be a potential loss for Utah. It's on the road. But that game could go either way. You're playing Cal off a bye. You should be able to beat them. And then you got USC on the road. You got Oregon. You got to play Arizona State, who you should be able to beat. And then you got Washington on the road. Then you got to play Arizona on the road. Then you got to play Prime in Colorado. So I think my floor for Utah is going to be 8 wins. But my ceiling for the Utes this year is 10. I definitely think they're more than capable of being able to have another 10-win season. Because this is not a team that you want to overlook. Like, they may not be as talented as Oregon or Washington or USC, but this is a team that prides themselves on being tougher than you up front and playing old school smash mouth football and throwing the football when need be and being a tough football team. And that's just something that I don't think too many Pac-12 teams are able to handle. These Pac-12 teams, they're just a lot of finesse to me. I don't think they really know what it's like to get down and dirty in them trenches on the mountains and the hills of Salt Lake, Utah. Like, Utah, for some reason, like, is just a little bit different compared to the rest of the teams in this conference. Like, you look at Utah, and they just don't play like a Pac-12 team to me. I don't know how you guys feel about Utah and what your thoughts are about them when you see them play, but this just is a different team compared to the rest of this conference. So, am I going to pick them to make it to the college football playoffs? No, I'm not. I don't think they're going to be able to make it to the college football playoffs unless they are able to improve the recruiting, because regardless what you Utes fans want to admit or not, the teams that make it to the college football playoffs are the teams that recruit at a very high level. Now, you develop at a really high level, but at some point you still got to have the talent and able to do that. So, when I look at Utah, I think their ceiling is 10 wins. I think their floor is 8 wins. And if I had to give you guys a record prediction, I say they win 9 games. I don't know if I'll go 10 just because I do think that USC is going to be really good this year. Yeah, I know you beat them last year, but let's not act like Caleb Williams wasn't balling out before he got injured now. All right, but I think Utah is just being a little bit overlooked. I think some people think they could end up winning only 8 games, but I will have them at 9. They're going to pull off a couple of upsets because that's just what Utah does. I feel bad for Washington, who definitely could be in the mix to make the college football playoffs, having to play them near the tail end of the season. Like, you never want to play Utah during the last remaining stretch of this season. You really don't, because this is the team that loves ruining people's college football playoff dreams. You saw what they did to Utah. Well, USC, like, everybody thought USC was going to roll over Utah. Now, we knew it was going to be a competitive game, but nobody thought that Utah was just going to roll USC the way they did. Everybody had USC as a lock for the playoffs, and Utah just rolled them boys. And same thing with Oregon the year prior. So you look at Utah, I don't think you should overlook them. I think they have the 4th or 5th best odds to win this conference, but I think they are probably the 3rd best team in this conference. I don't know who I would put ahead of them. You're going to have USC up there, Oregon, Washington, but I'll probably say they may be able to pull off an upset or two. I did say 3rd, but I'll say about 3 or 4. It's going to go either way, and even how they make it into the Pac-12 Championship last year was a little bit weird. Like, I think they won like a tiebreaker. It was something weird that ended up happening, why they ended up getting into the Pac-12 Championship. But I mean, like, the point is, you don't want to play Utah at the end of the year when you got college football playoff hopes on the line. So if you're Oregon, USC, Washington, you better pray to the football gods that you don't have to play the Utes in the Pac-12, because this definitely is a team that could win the Pac-12 once again, because the Pac-12 just doesn't have the kind of physicality, and they just don't have the toughness that Utah has. Kyle Whittingham is one of the most underrated coaches in college football. Like, I feel like unless you're a diehard college football fan, you don't really know how good of a coach Kyle Whittingham is. You probably could say he's a top 5 coach right now. So unless you really follow the sport and you're a real diehard or a real college football truther, you probably don't know who the hell Kyle Whittingham is. But I think that Utah is definitely being a little bit overlooked. You shouldn't overlook them. You should have learned your lesson back in 2021 when they smashed Mario Cristobal in Oregon twice. And if you didn't learn your lesson in 2021, you thought you would have learned last year in 2022. Don't sleep on the Utes. Just because they may not be in the playoff discussion doesn't mean that they still don't have a chance to win this conference. Their physicality, their scrappiness, their toughness, it's just something that always is able to get them a couple of upsets. I know when you look at this schedule on paper, you say, man, JT, USC, Oregon, and Washington, they're just more talented. Like, yeah, they are on paper, but that's why you play the games, people. True, people thought that Oregon wasn't going to lose to Utah again, and you saw what happened. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed, make sure that you leave a like, subscribe to the channel. We go live every day, Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Listen to the podcast, available on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. Please, 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 man, give us a 5-star review. We are really close to getting 100 5-star reviews on Apple. We currently at 69 of those things right now. We're trying to get to 100 before the NFL season begins. So if you love the content and you want to support, the only thing I ask for you is to give the podcast a 5-star review. This is it for this episode. I will see you guys tomorrow with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast.